Hey lads, Mac here again, and we're back with another series of videos we're gonna talk about the back line. And when I talk about the back line, I'm talking about the rhythm section of a band. So the drums, the bass guitar, and any of those kind of instruments that are gonna create the rhythmic pulse of the music. So what I wanted to do is start with some mixed foundations for the back line, and the best place to start in that series is to talk about the drum kit. The drum kit itself is made up of several instruments. As you know, we look at the drums as one instrument, so we have a drummer and a drum kit. We look at it as one instrument, but in reality the drum kit is made up of several instruments, and you have to look at the drum kit as both a whole, but you also have to look at the drum kit as a group of separate instruments that need to work together, need to work cohesively together. And then when you add the bass guitar into that as well, you have to then look at the back line as a whole. These are all separate instruments, but they need to work cohesively as a whole. So we're going to start with the kick drum today, and we're going to spend maybe a couple videos talking about setting up the kick drum, micing the kick drum. That's what we'll do today. And on the next video we'll talk about EQing the kick drum, and then we'll talk about EQing the kick drum with the bass guitar, complementary EQ. And then finally we'll talk about using compression to shape the tone of the kick drum as well. Compression, and maybe if we have some time and we're doing okay, we'll get on to using gates and downward expanders as well, and I'll explain what that is in a few videos from now. So we're going to go through at least 3 videos just settling in on the kick drum. Why so many videos on just this one instrument? Well guys, it's because the kick drum is the heart of a modern mix. It's the foundation instrument of a modern music mix. And when I say modern, I'm talking about the music that we've become accustomed to over the last 30-40 years. Rock, R&B, hip-hop, country, light rock, pop, all of these styles of music. The kick drum is sitting at the heart, or the foundation, of the pulse of that music. And if you don't get the kick drum right, if you don't set it up right, there's nothing that you're going to be able to do to get the rest of the instruments to glue together to sit right in the mix. The kick's got to be right, and it's got to be right with the bass guitar as well, and we'll talk about that in other videos, how to get the bass guitar working with the kick drum. So what I want to do right now is just give you an introduction to the kick drum and some basic principles on what kind of things we can look for on a weekly basis. When you come in to mix sound on a weekend, what can you look for here? Because essentially the kick drum's going to be set up already. But there are some things that you should be looking for, some consistency things that you should be looking for, and there's some principles that you should understand about a kick drum before you start tweaking and diddling knobs and faders on the mixing console. Okay. Okay, this is the kick drum. This is a 22-inch bass drum, and it has 2 skins on it. The skin closest to the drummer, the one that the kick pedal or the beater of the kick pedal comes in contact with the skin, that's called the batter head. And then we have here the front skin that goes on the front, that's called the resonant head. And the two skins need to work together to get a great sound off the kick drum. Now, in the design of the kick drum, in the design of the bass drum, when these companies design these things, they choose the wood, they choose the diameter to give the drum a natural sound, a natural frequency, that it's a tone it's going to produce. And it is important to make sure that the drum is tuned to produce that fundamental tone. And so everything that we're going to do here is to ensure that the sound we're capturing is the purest fundamental tone that we can get from this particular drum. We want a tight, punchy kick drum sound. We want something that's going to thump. In modern music, the sound that we're looking for is that generally that dry thump, that heartbeat-like sound that creates the pulse of the music. Now there's other styles of music where the sound is more open, more natural, more resonant. That would be jazz or maybe folk, or even in some forms of metal music, they want a more open, more resonant sound where you're hearing the sound of the drum ringing with all of its overtones and harmonics. But for us, in the kind of style of music that we're doing here at Hack, we want a dry thump that's going to create a heartbeat-like effect in the mix. So tight, punchy thump. It's going to give us a nice pulse and a nice impetus to the music. If we can get this right from the source, we actually have to do very little with EQ or compression. And those things will enhance the sound of the drum rather than detract from the sound of the drum. So everything starts at the source, and I've said this many, many times before. Super important to remember this principle. Garbage in, garbage out. It all starts at the source. So if the sound that you're getting here is not the best it can be, then you're not getting the best that you can get out in the front of house either. And no amount of EQ or compression or gating or reverb is going to solve the problems that you get from a garbage sound from the source. So why are we going over this? It's not as if there's a lot that you can do up here. The drum will be tuned for you, but I want you to understand how it works so that you can at least know what you're supposed to be listening for. Okay, so the first and foremost thing that we can do to ensure that we're getting a great kick drum sound is to make sure that the drum is in tune. Now, I've already spent some time tuning up this drum prior to the video shoot here, so this drum is already in tune, or at least the batter head is in tune. Without going into a lot of technicality, what we've done is we've tuned this drum to the fundamental tone that this drum can produce by loosening off the skin and then bringing it up to tension to the place where the drum will actually produce a usable tone. And the tone that this drum is producing is a C. It's a second octave C. And that's going to sit at about 65 hertz or so. So if you're back at the board and you're wondering what's the fundamental tone that this drum is producing, think about it on your EQ strip. About 65 hertz is what this drum is going to produce with all of its overtones and harmonics as well. But we're going to try to dampen that out, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. So this drum is producing a C. Now, if you can hear this well on the video, you'll notice, and it's pretty obvious here, and it would be easier if you guys were actually here listening to it as close to the drum as I am, but this drum is producing a nice low C that is defined, that is punchy, and that's got a really nice thump to it. You can actually feel it in your body, and it's important that the drum is tuned so it gets that. So we've got the batter head already tuned. Now what we're going to do is we're going to put the resonant head on, and we're going to tune the resonant head a half step up from C to C sharp. And what that's going to do is it's going to create a little bit of offset. When the batter, or when the beater of the kick pedal strikes against the batter head, it creates compression. and that compression actually, that air pressure strikes against the resonant head, and if you have it tuned a little bit higher, you'll actually get a tighter, more focused tone out of the drum than if you tuned the resonant head with the batter head at the exact same frequency, or the exact same pitch rather. So what we want to do is batter head at C and the resonant head about C sharp or so, and that'll give a really nice tight focused sound out of the kick drum. And then we're going to add a little bit of dampening, and I'll talk about that next. Okay, so we're going to provide some dampening for the kick drum now. There's lots of ways that we can do this. Typically what you see in churches and garage bands, and yeah, even some pro guys will use all kinds of different materials in the drum to dampen out the drum, to get that thud that they're looking for, that thump that they're looking for, that dry, thumpy kick drum sound. And I've seen all kinds of things, from blankets to pillows to, you name it, throwing in here, jackets, throwing in here to try to dampen out the sound of the drum. The key thing is, though, is we don't want to dampen out the fundamental frequency of the drum. We don't want to choke out its sound. What we want to do is we want to enhance the fundamental frequency of the drum by dampening out the overtones and the harmonics that are competing with the fundamental frequency and that clutter up our mix. See, this kick drum, when it sits in the mix with the rest of these drums and the bass guitar and the keyboards and the electric guitars, we want a distinct, punchy, tight, focused, fundamental tone coming from this drum that is going to be distinct in the mix. And to do that, we need to dampen off the overtones and harmonics that the microphone is going to pick up inside the drum. So to do that, we just need a little bit of dampening. And that can be done with different products like E-rings around the front, around the batter head. And I don't know if you can see this in here, but there is an E-ring already built into this particular skin that provides a little bit of dampening for the batter head. And both Evans and Remo make products that you can put inside the drum to create a dampening effect as well, and a variable dampening effect. And we'll be moving into some of those things as time goes on and money is available. We'll actually be purchasing some of those things as well and using those products, because I think they work really well. But in the meantime, we've got a makeshift solution for dampening. What we've done is we've taken a little pillow and we've wrapped it up with duct tape. Pretty simple thing to do. And all we're going to do is we're going to take the pillow and we're going to put it lightly up against the batter head. Okay, we're not going to squash it up against the batter head, and it's not going to do any good if it's sitting off the batter head. So we're going to take it and we're going to put it just up against the batter head. And then we're going to tape it down. And that's going to provide just a little bit of dampening for the batter head. Another thing that I wanted to talk about too, and this is something we're going to be doing in the future, is the resonant head has a hole cut out in it. And I've said this before, that when you're miking a drum, if you're using a traditional microphone that you're sticking through the hole, it's really important that either you get the microphone all the way into the hole and into the middle of the drum, a little bit offset, but you get it through the hole and not halfway into the hole. So if you're using a traditional microphone, make sure it's all the way through the hole or it's all the way outside the drum. But don't put the microphone halfway in through this hole, because this hole is actually kind of like a release valve. All that pressure that's being built up inside the drum is blowing out through this hole. And if you put the microphone halfway in, you're picking up all kinds of overtones and harmonics that are resonating right here in this hole, that are building up in this hole, and you're not going to get a great sound at all. So just to reiterate, when you're using a traditional microphone, make sure it's all the way through this hole or all the way outside the drum, but not halfway through the hole. Also, because this area resonates so much with harmonics and overtones, we're going to be putting in a dampening system in the hole as well to dampen this out, and that will also help tighten and focus the sound of the kick drum. So dampening, just to recap, dampening can happen through the use of E-rings. It can happen through the use of either commercial product or a homemade product that we use to put up against the batter head. Sometimes if you want a really, really dry kick sound, you can put a little bit of something up against the resonant head as well. Here, we just want a really, tight focus sound, but we want it to be natural too. Well, the fundamental tone is going to ring, but without all the extra harmonics and overtones. And so all we're doing is we're adding a little bit of dampening up against the batter head, and then we'll use some of the other products to dampen the resonant head and the outside of the batter as well. And that's pretty much it for dampening at the moment. Okay, now we're going to talk about EQing without actually EQing from the console. How do I do that? We're going to EQ by making sure, of course, that our drum, just like we've been talking about, is tuned. So if the drum is tuned properly and we've got an adequate amount of dampening, then the drum is going to produce a fundamental tone. In this particular case, it's producing a C. And that C is around 65 hertz. So if you're thinking about it in the terms of frequency response, we're looking at about 65 hertz. And so if you know that in advance, if you know that this drum is producing a 65 hertz fundamental tone, you can consider that when you're setting up your mix from the back, that this drum is going to sit well in the mix at about 65 hertz. So now we can move to actually miking that drum. There's lots of different philosophies for miking. A kick drum, oftentimes we want that hyped kick drum sound. We want that nice big thud in around the 80 hertz range. But this one, well, usually between 60 and 100 hertz anyway. So I split the difference and say around 80, but in this particular case we're looking at about 65 hertz as the fundamental tone of this drum, and we're going to try to capture that with this SM91, Shure SM91 boundary mic. So we're going to take this and actually put this inside the drum. It would fit through the porthole of the resonant head and sit between 2 and 6 inches away from the batter head, with the microphone, the front of the microphone, facing towards the batter head. So in this particular case, we're about 3 inches away. So I'm just going to sit this on the pillow, and then we would tape this down so that it doesn't move. And if you've been part of my training sessions before, you've seen me do this. And we've done this, and you've heard the difference it can make. Now this particular microphone, this is a boundary microphone, and it's what they call a half cardioid microphone. So it does pick up from the front. The microphone is also susceptible to proximity effect, meaning that the closer you get to the source, the more the bass is going to be enhanced. So if I've got this microphone and it's 8 inches away from the batter head, it's not going to pick up as much bass, or the bass effect isn't going to be enhanced as much as if I get it 2 inches away from the batter head. So you can actually EQ before you get back to the board just by setting the microphone where you want it. So if you want a little bit more of a hyped bass sound, you can actually position the microphone a little bit closer to the batter head and then go back to the board, put on your cans, take a listen to the kick drum and say, what is that sounding like? Is that the sound I'm looking for? Then listen to it through the front of house. Compare that with what you're hearing through the headphones. Is it what you're looking for? How is that going to sit in the mix? Okay, so I'm again splitting the difference, and we're going to try to hit the middle of the road by going at about 4 inches away from the batter head, so splitting the difference between 2 and 6 inches, and that should give us a pretty decent and accurate representation of what this drum is producing. And that will allow you guys to already get a great kick drum tone even before you touch the EQ on the mixing console. Well, that's a lot of information in one sitting. But hopefully you can listen to this video back a few times. If there's something that you missed or something you want to focus in on, something you want to hear again, just hit rewind and listen to it 2-3 times until you understand these principles that I'm talking about, because they are super important. The kick drum is the heart and the foundation of your mix. If you can't get it right, then everything else is going to suffer.